Challenges won't stop me. It's a strength and resilience mindset. Let me tell you, it's not ignoring the difficulties in your life. Just look at it as a journey of seeing opportunities in the challenges and discovering who God intends for you to be. Whether it's host Melanie Brown's motivational messages or it's courageous women sharing the strategies and habits they utilize when navigating those unexpected turns, you can expect to become equipped and empowered to fight to overcome any challenge that dares to cross your path. The goal? Building and maintaining a challenges won't stop me mindset. Let's go.
Welcome. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Challenges Won't Stop Me podcast. Before I introduce my guest, it's imperative I warn you that today's episode contains graphic content about human trafficking and could be a trigger for those who have experienced abuse or violence at the hands of another. January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Today's guest, Sandy Storm, shares the numerous challenges she faced throughout the 20 years she was exploited and dehumanized. But she also shares how during those difficult years, she knew God had a plan for her life. It begs the question, could any good come from someone so broken? Yes. Sandy cried out to God, handing him her broken life. And in return, he graciously exchanged her brokenness with salvation wrapped in his unfailing love. When I first heard Sandy's story, I couldn't help but think of Joseph and all the challenges he faced throughout the book of Genesis. But the best part of his story is that defining moment in Genesis 50 when his brothers begged for his forgiveness. He said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish the saving of many lives." Wow. God whispered those same words to Sandy, telling her that he preserved her life during those horrific years so she could be a part of the solution to ending human trafficking. Thus, Sandy is a modern-day abolitionist and serves as the director of strategic impact for a nonprofit called Deliver Fund. Their mission is to keep communities safe by bringing human traffickers to justice. She's also the author of 3 novellas that are based on her experiences. Congratulations to Sandy and her husband, who will be celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary this year. Sandy is full of life and joy and hope, and she's a powerful warrior who is helping to destroy the darkness in our world. Will you join me in saying, thank you, Sandy? I invite you to listen to my conversation with my new friend, Sandy Storm. Let's go. Sandy, welcome.
Thank you. It's a joy to be with you today and an honor to address your audience.
Well, we have a lot to talk about. You have faced many challenges throughout your life. Let's start from the earliest mention of trauma in your life and challenge in your life.
Well, I probably wasn't even aware of the life I was born into. I had no idea that I was born into a hostile environment. My parents were both struggling with their own addictions, with a lot of disease and anger issues, mental illness. Before I was even 5 years old, I had experienced domestic violence, just instability. And when I was only 5 years old, my father actually took his own life. He was suffering from mental illness and schizophrenia. And at a very young age, I was basically orphaned. That made me very vulnerable. It made my young mother very vulnerable to be a widow with orphan children. And, those vulnerabilities, unfortunately, are open doors for predators. Not long after my father's death, we were approached by what would have appeared to be an enterprising businessman who made my mother an offer she just couldn't refuse to start a new life and have access to beautiful things and places and things that she wouldn't have been able to have access to in the small town living in poverty where we came from. And we were whisked away to a big city with where we started attending country clubs and yacht clubs and fancy parties and boats on the water. Everything on the outside would have seemed like we had finally arrived and we had risen out of poverty. But the truth of what was happening behind the scenes was, even starting at 6 years old, I was being abused daily by these businessmen. It's a sad story, but I wanna lead with hope. I mean, I started out with my father passing away and then being targeted and groomed by just a group of really evil men,
Mm.
but in the midst of it all, I know that God had a plan for my life even then, and I know He was with me. Even though I couldn't see Him, I can look back today and see His fingerprints all over my story, and so I'm filled with hope today to share of how He ministered to me, and He kept me through all of that trauma.
That is just incredible. Uh, how many challenges that you faced as a young person, and yeah, if a person comes and offers all of these different things that you and your mom and I guess your brothers and sisters didn't know, it would be very enticing to say yes. And it sounds like the whole package wasn't made aware to your mom. She just was given all of the wonderful side of it, but not the dark side of it. So, how long did that situation last?
Yeah, and Melanie, I think it's important for your audience to be aware that this is what trafficking in the United States looks like. It's generally not a white van pulling up and kidnapping a kid off a street corner or from a bus stop. That does happen, but it's very rare. And more often than not, traffickers target vulnerable people and then exploit those vulnerabilities for their own financial gain. So while my mother was a target herself, um, there the life that we lived was so destructive, and there was such instability and abuse happening inside of the home. It was impossible to stay safe. It was impossible to live a normal life. And after 6 years of daily abuse within the home, I started running away. I was only 12 years old, and I would run away, and I would rather sleep under a bridge and eat food out of trash cans than put up with what was happening in our home every day. And I learned very quickly when I was in those situations on the streets, I was desperate. I was in need of protection and some kind of financial support, a place to sleep, something to eat. I had already been exposed to drugs and alcohol at that time. And I learned very quickly that that's not a safe place for a vulnerable person. And there was what would seem to be a never ending stream of men who would be willing to give me what I needed for access to my body. So
Mm.
at 12 and 13 years old, there are constantly these men who would offer to help me at a price. And that even challenges me today to know that that reality is out there, to know that there are men in positions of authority who are actively seeking out young, vulnerable people who have been groomed into the sex trafficking world, and these men are looking for opportunities to exploit those vulnerabilities. So knowing that reality is a challenge every day, but like I said, I'm filled with hope because I know even in those dark situations, even throughout my high school career when my boyfriends were taking advantage of me, they're in their 30s, they've done prison time, they're selling drugs and they've got guns and fast cars, and that's the lifestyle I thought that was appealing at the time. I can look back today and see that these were men that were taking advantage of my vulnerabilities of the vulnerability of being a victim of abuse as a child, the vulnerability of poverty, the vulnerability of just being naive. I was a teenager. I was a young person without the experience that an adult has from the world. That life was very destructive and very dangerous, but I'm still here. I lived through it
Yes.
all. And even
Yes.
I could even say it got worse. Sadly, I didn't get rescued. There was no knight in shining armor who came and kicked in a door and took me out of one of these bad situations. And it seemed to continue to progress. I felt like I had a sign on my head that said, I'm vulnerable, take advantage of me.
Mm.
But I can see today that even through all of the abuse, even through all of the hard, difficult circumstances that I faced, I know today that the hope that I was able to hold on to came from the Lord. And He had a plan for my life even then. He had purpose and destiny even then. And when the enemy was trying to use these evil men to destroy my life, the Lord had a plan, and He knew that today I would be here with you. He knew that I would be able to share this hope, that I would be able to educate the public on the truth about human trafficking, inspire people about the story of what He's done in my life, and empower the community to actually do something to make human trafficking a thing of the past.
I absolutely love that you have included hope. Do you have any examples of when you are now looking back that you could see that God was there with you all that time? You might not have seen it then, but now you can easily see it looking back.
You know, Melanie, that's a really great question. And it's easier to look back and see the fingerprints of the Lord and how He was working behind the scenes than it is when you're in the midst of the difficult situation to see Him. And we'll pray these prayers and ask for help, and we think that He's not showing up, or we think that he can't hear us. But when we're able to look back, they say hindsight is 2020, right? So I can look back now, and that's where I pulled the inspiration for the books that I've written,
Mhm.
is the journey that I had when I couldn't see him with my physical eyes, when I didn't know him because I wasn't raised in Bible study and Sunday school, like a lot of the population has those childhood experiences. I had very different childhood experiences. And I didn't have a habit of attending church or reading a Bible or listening to music that talks about the hope that we can find in Jesus Christ. I had a very different experience. But once I gave my life to him, once I entered into his kingdom, once I was able to access this truth, and now when I read and study scripture, when I press into him, when I worship him, now I can see he shows me where he was every step of the way. And that's why I wrote my stories in such a manner. It does tell the truth. It does reveal the painful reality of what trafficking really is in the United States of America, but it also walks the reader through that journey of hope. And there's hope woven into every page because I survived. And I'm here today to tell the story. And I believe that God gave me the story and the ability to tell it for a reason, and He's not going to waste it.
Oh no, because of the joy and the hope that you have, there is so much to gain from you. Those of us who have never experienced anything remotely close to your experiences, we just we can't wrap our minds around it, and we need to hear stories like yours, not to focus on the evil, the trauma that you have been through, but to know the realities and then to see who you are now and that you've overcome so many challenges and you're not just living day by day and just trudging through. You are thriving. And that is the best part of your story is that, yeah, you came through, but you could have just survived, right? And that's not a bad thing. Please don't misunderstand me. Surviving is very important, but because of God intersecting in your story over and over and over, and then you identifying Him. And how old were you when you said yes to Jesus?
Well, that was in 2004. I had a very difficult path, a very difficult journey to Jesus.
Yeah.
And it didn't look like what probably most people experience. It was very messy. There were a lot of detours, there were a lot of U turns, but he was there the whole time. And when I got out of high school, I thought that I was going to take back my power. I thought I was going to take the money from the men. They had abused me for so long, and I
Mm,
thought if I could go work in a strip club, I could be the one in charge. I would have limits on their access to me, and I would be able to be the one who tells them where to sit and how much everything costs. But I learned very quickly that strip clubs aren't safe places for vulnerable people, especially not somebody who has issues with abuse or a past of trauma. And I was consistently and continuously exploited through the strip club industry and even through the traffickers on the street that we refer to as pimps. My experience in that industry of commercial sexual exploitation and my experience living through the grooming, the conditioning, the dehumanization, the
mhm.
commodification, and the sale of my body by these people who were making a profit. When I was trapped in those situations, on the outside, it would have looked like something that I had gotten myself into. It would have looked like situations that I had chosen for myself. But the truth is that the trauma I had experienced, the grooming that I had experienced, and the culture of our world that says sex sells, that says the value of a young person is their sexual identity. That
Mm.
was so toxic to me, and it kept me trapped in those cycles of abuse and exploitation. But God had a plan for my life, even in the midst of all of those evil experiences, even in the most hopeless, helpless situations. After a series of events, I cried out to Jesus. I gave my life to him, and he
Mm.
gave me a brand new life. It was on March 18th of 2004, and when I handed over my broken life, I received in return access to a kingdom that I have been able to journey into deeper every day since. That's where I'm thriving. I
Yes.
was surviving. I might have been a victim. You maybe could have referred to me as a survivor until that moment where I stepped into my true identity. And that's what
Yes.
I'm living today. And being in his kingdom and having access to the tools, the keys of forgiveness, the keys of prayer, the tool of spiritual warfare, of worship, those have changed my life completely. There's a preacher that I enjoy listening to, and he says that what I am today is something that's never before been seen on the heathen earth. I am a new creation,
I
and
love it.
I'm in the kingdom. That's where I get the power to truly thrive.
Preach it, girl. I love that. So let's talk briefly about what you do now with everything that you have gone through. God has called you back to that, not into it, but back to that to be a warrior for those who are still in it or who are being groomed to be in it. That has to be a very challenging place to be in that every day of your work, I would assume, and I could be wrong, but every day you think about your past and you think about the things that you have gone through. Maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's a good reminder in that it fuels you even more to do everything you can to stop it.
Yeah, I made a decision in 2009 when I heard about human trafficking. I went to a ladies' Bible study and I heard a presentation on human trafficking. And I made a decision that I was going to be part of the solution to ending human trafficking. I came home and told my husband there are men, women, and children being sold for sex against their will right here in the United States of America. And I have to do something about that. And I became a zealous volunteer. I worked to organize film screenings, task forces. I spoke at Rotary clubs or would do trainings for teachers in schools, anything, any position I could get where I could influence political leaders, church leaders, community leaders,
Mm.
business people to educate them about the truth about trafficking. I wanted to use those opportunities to try to incite change. And it was several years into my work. I was doing research, I was studying the issue, reading every book I could find on trafficking, watching documentaries, and even some really awful Hollywood movies about human trafficking
Yeah.
that were not very realistic. I had a light bulb moment. It was years into what I refer to as the justice movement and my work within the justice movement. I realized that this is my story. See, I had been a victim for so many years, but when I gave my life to Jesus, I was completely redeemed and completely
Yes.
set free. I was given a new life. And I
Yes.
knew that I had been abused. I knew that I had been in situations and circumstances that were exploitative, but I didn't have that light bulb moment for several years. And when I did have that revelation of all that I had been set free from, all that I had been redeemed from, it was overwhelming. And I could hear the Lord calling me into this work. He told me that he had preserved me for this work. And he had
Whoa.
allowed me to have some of those experiences so that I would be able to tell the truth about trafficking, to educate the community. And I started, I wrote my first book at that time, and I really waited. My husband and I prayed a lot about the timing of coming out with my personal experience story. Once that happened, and I started releasing my books and speaking as a survivor, my pathway led me through absolute divine leadership of the Lord to Deliver Fund. And that's where I am today. And the
Mhm.
work I'm doing on this team today, now, you want to talk about some challenges? I'm challenged every day of my life working with this team. We're a private nonprofit intelligence firm, and we are using technology and innovation to solve the problem of human trafficking at scale. I work with former special operators, CIA, NSA, Navy SEALs, and we are building technology solutions and training law enforcement to hunt, arrest, and prosecute human traffickers. I'm able to use my personal experience of being in that illicit marketplace, of being in that underworld of society. I'm able to inform investigations and train law enforcement how to target and identify human traffickers, build prosecutable cases, and take them off the streets, put them behind bars where they belong, rescue and recover the victims, and prevent future victims from being brought into this evil world. So the work I do today, while it is extremely rewarding, I'm challenged every day. I
Yeah.
do have to look back into my own past. I do have to read stories of unbelievable grief and suffering of human beings. And I do have to face the reality that there is a society that allows human beings to be bought, sold, and bodies to be rented on an open marketplace. It's happening on the internet that we all have access to every day through social media, through websites that you don't have to go onto the dark web to access. And while that is very challenging work, I hold on to hope because I know that the work that our team is doing is providing a solution and ultimately an end to human trafficking.
I have no words. That is so needed in our society. And I am grateful for you and all of the people that you work with, and especially that your organization is training the people who have the ability to arrest these perpetrators and to make sure that they go to jail for a very long time. I am so grateful for you accepting the call into what has to be a very hard job, but as you said, very rewarding. I can only imagine seeing those perpetrators arrested helps you to feel there is a change coming and that at some point in time there will be an end to this evil that is in our society.
Absolutely. It's extremely rewarding work. And I'm really big on justice. My whole team, we're really big on justice and we're driven to pursue justice. We are not a religious organization. We're a nonprofit private intelligence firm. So we do this training and we build these technology solutions for law enforcement through the support of our private donors. And it's a very necessary work, but we can solve the problem of human trafficking at scale, putting the brightest minds and the highest levels of training and experience that like what our team has through their special operations and law enforcement backgrounds, and then braiding in the survivors such as myself to bring that lived experience element into it. Our law enforcement, while these are challenging cases for our law enforcement agents, we're here to give them the support that they need and
Yes.
and help them to walk through these cases. And then if I can offer encouragement to the survivors that they're recovering and let them know I've been in a similar situation and I got out and I'm
Yeah.
still out and I'm living a life today where I'm thriving. If I'm able to offer that encouragement through our investigations and operations with law enforcement, that's the real magic. That's where I really feel like God is using what happened to me to bring hope to other people.
I just love hearing you talk because I can see the passion for this very, very important mission that you are a part of, and I am again grateful. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up.
Thank you, Melanie. I want to encourage anybody who wants to partner with us to share this level of hope to end human trafficking, to partner with us at our website, deliverfund.org. Please follow us on social media at deliverfund, at author Sandy Storm. We are sharing content every day to help educate, inspire, and empower the community to end human trafficking.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I'm excited because you're coming back for another interview so we can talk about spiritual warfare. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Melanie. God bless you.